for joining us. I'm Elizabeth McDowell. I am an instructional coach in Northern Virginia, and I will be your moderator today. The start of this school year is going to be different than any school year any educator has ever experienced. We're marking new territory and taking on new challenges every single day. And you're here because you want to make this the best learning experience for your kids that you can. This isn't about tools, it's about good pedagogy, it's about good teaching, it's about keeping the focus on student-centered learning, no matter where that learning is happening. While this shift has started for many of us several years ago, this year, because of the new circumstances, all of us are pushing our boundaries and trying to find new ways to communicate with our families, support our communities, overcome gaps in access, and to reach all of our students. When we can't see our students every day, when we meet a new class of 150 or more students for the first time online, the regular dynamics change. How do we build relationships? How do we engage and focus inquiry? How do we encourage creativity and collaborative thinking, especially when our students are face-to-face but aren't allowed to work together or in groups? How do we let our families know that we care about their success? Our focus today will cover instruction, creativity, collaboration and conversation, social emotional learning and wellness, differentiated teaching, and connecting with parents and caregivers using Google Apps and Add-ons. Each of the members of this panel will talk about the tools they use to reach these goals and how you can customize them for your environment, whether you are fully digital, in-person, or hybrid. Today, we'll be learning from Jasara Hines from Florida, Pam Hubler from South Carolina, Emily Thomas from Minnesota, and Elisa Wern from Florida. Each of them are experienced Google certified trainers, and I'm going to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit more about them. Jasara, we'll start with you.
Okay, hi there, everyone. As Elizabeth said, my name is Jasara Hines, and I'm actually in Illinois. And it is 66 degrees today, so good, good old Illinois. I actually teach in a south suburb of Chicago. I'm at Thornwood High School, go T-Birds. I teach English, sophomores and seniors, and I have been neck deep in Google PD all summer long, trying to get our teachers ready for our remote start. So we will be remote all first semester.
Thank you. Emily.
I am from Minnesota, as you said, from the Twin Cities area, Minneapolis and St. Paul, and I am a tech integration specialist and trainer. So I get to spend all of my days training teachers on how to do anything and everything with Google or anything else, and it's pretty great.
Thank you. Elisa.
Hi, everybody. As she said, I'm from Florida, and I approach things a little bit different. I'm an occupational therapist and an assistive technology professional, so my time is geared towards helping our teachers and students with disabilities being able to access content, which is sometimes a struggle in typical times, and it is ever more a struggle in these times. So some of the things I'm going to share are kind of related to how do we make things accessible for everyone.
Thank you. And Pam.
All right. Hey, everyone. I'm Pam Hubler. I am in Charleston, South Carolina. So I'm one of the lucky ones waiting for some storm weather coming in. So if I hop out, I apologize. I lost my internet. But I'm an instructional coach at a K-8 school. But I am also the technology guru that, I love to help all the teachers with technology, which has been very helpful. We did end up in March going completely remote. And luckily, our district was already in the place where they had e-learning days set up to make up for hurricane days and things like that. So we were in a really good place to start. So it really was helpful. And so now I'm just like you guys, were during the summer doing a lot of Google PD for those people that all of a sudden realize, oh, I really need to pay attention. So that's where we're at now.
Thank you guys so much for joining us and for lending us your experience. We're going to start with the first question. I will read out the question and then I will call on each of our presenters to give you an opportunity to answer. If anybody else has something that they want to add on to something that someone is already saying, feel free to go ahead and chime in. You don't have to specifically wait for your turn. So our first question is about instruction. Jasara, I'm going to start with you. When you made the transition to distance learning in the spring, what were some of the Google apps or add-ons that you found most beneficial for your instructional purposes?
So as an English teacher, I do a lot of assessment, right? We got to assess vocab, grammar, writing. So before the spring, paper, pencil with assessment. Once we got into remote learning, I found this awesome tool called Automagical Forms. So it's an add-on. You can take existing Microsoft or PD docs and it will upload everything into a form format. So you don't have to sit there and type everything out. So that was like my go-to, because I could still keep the assessments rolling. I could still, change my instruction based on student scores. So that was something. And of course, I could not live without Google Classroom. I think that's like a no-brainer. Everything was on Google Classroom. All the resources, whether for instruction or just mental health, everything went on Google Classroom.
And Emily, when you made the transition to distance learning in the spring, what did you find most beneficial?
So I think maybe a lot of people experienced this. We went from lots of face-to-face meetings, seeing our students face-to-face, to being all virtual. So we're all just meeting over Google Meet, which was what my district chose to use. And we found that we were having difficulty with students who were trying to get attention from the instructor or from other students, and we needed a way to do that. So we stumbled across this fabulous little extension for Chrome that's called Nod, which allows you to react with an emoji or raise your hand, and it shows everybody in the room, but also then alerts the host of the meeting that you would like to say something, or allows you to react to what's being said without actually disrupting or unmuting to talk. So it's a really slick little tool, and we deployed it to all of our students, and they use it every day.
And Elisa, what instructional tools made the transition good for you?
So probably the number one tool that we worked really hard to kind of put in place and get teachers to be more aware of is a embedded Google tool that's already there that's very little known, that's called Jamboard. Jamboard gives you interactive whiteboard features. I think that was the one thing that immediately teachers realized we have to find a replacement for, that interactivity, that being able to do things and manipulate things. So being able to put in place Jamboard, I think, helped tremendously. And so as we're adding things and talking about things, I just want to make sure people know that we are adding everything that's being talked about into a Wakelet, which is the other tool that was very helpful for us to disseminate information. And I'll periodically put that Wakelet link into the chat as we go. But Wakelet and Jamboard are probably our first go-tos.
And Pam, you're up. What tools did you find useful for instruction?
I think most of our teachers really started hopping on board using Google Slides, just so that way, for being able to present the information, but also as like a one-stop shop for everything. If they did a screencast, they could stick it in there. If they had audio, they could stick it in there. If they had a video, they could stick it in there. So that was super helpful for the teachers. And then as far as me as an instructional coach, we created a Google Calendar that had the Meet link for all of our PLC meetings. And I think we had I think our PLCs were really helpful for teachers, just because everything was changing week by week. And it was one link that you could always go to hop on, even if it was like, hey, I have a question, can you hop on real quick? And we had that same link all the time. So the calendar, mixing the Google Calendar and the meeting together was really helpful.
So you guys have said some really good things. You've talked about focusing students in chats. You've talked about making sure that assessments can move forward without hiccups, creating interactivity using Jamboard and Google Slides. and also the important element of PLCs and that communication between teachers and staff members to help support each other. So as a follow-up to what helped you transition in the spring, and you may have primarily answered this already, but what are your favorite Google apps and add-ons to use specifically for asynchronous learning? And Jasara, I'm going to start with you again.
Okay, so I am a HyperDoc enthusiast. So Google Docs, push that out to kids, link every activity for the week, link external sources, link, visuals, YouTube videos. So that's like my favorite thing, but also Cami. So my school, we were not digital, like we were not one-to-one. So a lot of things that we traditionally did, required paper, pencil, pen, right? So when we made this switch, I had to rely on Cami a lot to give my students the ability to write on a lot of the scanned documents that I had to upload into my Google Docs and my classroom. So it was an awesome tool. It didn't require a lot of pre-existing knowledge to use. It was very user intuitive, and my kids could highlight, write, complete graphic organizers, and send it back to me seamlessly.
Thank you. Emily, I'm passing the mic to you.
I'm going to second HyperDocs, but I'm going to take a little spin on the HyperDoc and say Hyper Slides. A lot of times students that I've worked with will just kind of skip through the doc really quickly, but having slides and then using the embedded link feature where you can link to particular slides, so to kind of lead them through, I've called them like choose your own adventure slides, because it kind of feels like a choose your own adventure book like we read when we were kids, or maybe you didn't. I did, and I loved them. But sort of leading you through, it feels a little bit more like a game, even though it's really not. It's kind of that first step towards like a gamifying it, but using one slide per activity rather than a cell of a chart in a doc. So just a slight twist on a HyperDoc.
Thank you. Elisa.
So I think, we kind of dug deep into the best ways to get out resources quickly. So we did, do what we could to, have available recorded things, whether that was help sessions for teachers or help sessions for students on getting started with particular tools, like making a, how do you, set up and get into your account for books, those kind of things, making sure that the help guides were there to go with our asynchronous learning that the teachers were putting in place.
And Pam.
Okay, and I agree with you guys with the HyperDocs. That was fabulous. A lot of our teachers hopped on board with that, using slides, docs, and even Wakelet as that platform for HyperDocs. But mainly Google Classroom. That was kind of our hub for everything, really just for the connection between the teachers. And then Screencastify. Screencastify was one of those things that helped teachers realized they were saying the same things over and over again, and then they would have questions. The kids would have questions, so they would just do a quick Screencastify, and they can share it in any of those places pretty easily. So those are probably my Google Classroom and Screencastify were the two that I think we use the most.
So now that you've had an opportunity to reflect on this past spring and what worked well in the spring, and you've also had an opportunity to do a whole lot of new learning over the summer, what are you most excited to use in the Back to School 2020?
So for me, I am really excited about all of the new features that will be revealed with Google Meet, particularly the breakout rooms. I think that was one of the major things that we lacked in the spring. We wanted a way for kids to collaborate while still under our supervision. So with this new update, that's going to be amazing to have. Also time slots, like using time slots in the calendar for one-on-one meetings with students, integrating Google Meet into that. But the thing I'm looking forward to most is the grade transfer, the grade transfer extension. So our LMS is PowerSchool, and it does not talk or sync with Google Classroom. So grade transfer extension is going to allow me to take my grades from Google Classroom and put them straight into PowerSchool, and I cannot wait.
Emily.
I think the tool I'm most excited about, there's a lot that I'm excited about. I mean, I agree about the Google Meet new features that are coming out, and the potential integrations with Jamboard is really exciting too. But I think I am most excited about getting students and staff using Pear Deck this fall, using it both for synchronous in-person, if we can be in person, or online meetings, as well as using the asynchronous tool so that you really get all of that feedback from each student, and you can see how each student is processing the learning throughout the whole presentation. So I'm pretty stoked about Pear Deck this year.
I have to admit that I'm a big fan of the new audio feature and the feedback features. Elisa.
I second and third the Pear Deck. So we have a lot of teachers who haven't used it at all. And so introducing that while we're also introducing everyone switching to Canvas as an LMS is going to be a huge feat, but we're really looking at ways that we can help teachers see how it makes things better and easier. So both Pear Deck and looking at integrating a district-wide tool we have that's called Snap and Read that allows pretty much everything to be read to them and some study skills built in. I think those two, as well as for some of my classrooms of students with disabilities, really integrating Book Creator in a way we haven't done before, in an asynchronous way. And also for those students that are in person, we're going to kind of be a hybrid mix as of today. So being able to integrate all of that and helping teachers to see how technology can really enable them to do their jobs better and more efficiently, and then that we can break down some of those tech phobic walls as we're doing it.
Thank you. And Pam.
And I'll have to hop on with the same Pear Deck for sure. I'm really excited to get into that more. We realized since we started this throughout March that we needed more engagement, because that was the hardest part to get the kids to really be engaged. So Pear Deck will be a big help. And then also Edpuzzle, because a lot of our teachers were starting to explore Edpuzzle, but we were able to get a subscription for that. So everyone will have access to that, just to the videos that they do make. They can make them a little bit more engaging. So anything to add some more engagement.
I second the engagement as well. All right, so we've covered instruction. We really want to talk about some of the creativity as well. A couple of the things that you guys mentioned, like Elisa, when you talked about Book Creator, really do build on that creativity element for our students. And what are some of your favorite apps or add-ons for promoting creativity in distance learning? And can you give us an example of how you've used it in a specific activity? Jasara.
So we do this short story project with the sophomores, and basically they have to take a short story from anywhere and talk about, major themes, characters, plot. So I had my kids make a Google site for this short story. So it was their creation with the use of templates. It was not difficult or tedious for students with very little website design to be able to use. They could put videos, they did audios, they integrated other things like Flipgrid into there. So it was really cool. And of course, slides, those are great for presentation and for creating, documents that they want to present to their friends and their teachers.
Emily.
I'm going to kind of keep going right with Google Slides. I think that's really such a powerful tool, and there's so much you can do with it. It's kind of I've heard it called the Swiss Army knife of the Google Suite, and it's true, it is. But what I really love about it is you can change the size of the documents. You can really make a big poster. You can make something very small. You can do whatever you need to do with it and really kind of personalize it and make something very, very creative. And just for some added fun, I'm going to throw in the Bitmoji extension, the Chrome extension, so you can add your little mini cartoon self into presentations. maybe it's silly, but students seem to at least smile or laugh when you use them. So
it's a good way to build relationships, especially when you're not there face to face. Elisa.
Yeah, so like you said, Book Creator is a great way to build in some creativity on the students' end. And in terms of the activities that we're putting together for our students, if you have any students that need visuals, we are using Lesson Pix, P-I-X, quite a bit, which helps you kind of take some vocabulary and then be able to make board games with it, be able to integrate it into PowerPoint. It's one of those kind of very little known features of visuals and creative learning materials that we're really having our teachers and therapists utilize to help make materials very diversely, but that can be interactive, whether they're on screen or in person.
Thank you. And Pam.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stick with our Google Docs and slides, mainly slides. And yes, Casey Bell often refers to it as that Swiss Army knife. I totally agree. And I think like one of the add-ons, they've got the Noun Project, the icons by Noun Project. I use that all the time just to add some more visuals. And it's also like you can use HyperDocs for specific activities, and to like categorize assignments, and just to make it a little less text heavy when you're sharing resources with students. So like if you're doing something for ELA, you always use the same icon. They know they can click right on that and it goes to whatever content you want them to work on for the day. So you can mix that along with your HyperDocs and Google Slides or Hyper Slides like you were talking about earlier. So those are probably my favorite.
I discovered the Noun Project last week and I'm using it for my staff resource site this year. So
I use it all the time. I love it.
All right, so now we want to move on to collaboration and conversation. What tools did you use to engage students in conversation and collaboration to build classroom community and foster peer-to-peer relationships? Jasara.
So once we went remote, obviously, Meet was a constant. So getting on the Meet, talking, making sure we're still alive and doing well and holding up, right? And just keeping, keeping the emotions high. But I know it's not exactly a Google tool, but Flipgrid. I mean, kids can record themselves, give short messages. I sent a lot of messages via Flipgrid to my kids. Screencastify would be another way, like you can send little short clips of yourself using your webcam to your kids just to keep them, their feelings in check during this trying time. So that's what I did.
And that'll touch into our social emotional wellness question in a minute as well. Emily.
We kind of opted for sometimes the simple solution is the best solution method, in that we just encouraged students to have meetings with each other, set up a Google Meet, sort of like a FaceTime, but without requiring a personal cell phone, and just meet with one another and talk and let them just be friends. They talk in the cafeteria. We kind of didn't have that experience. We also put together some lists of safe games that students and staff could play kind of if they had some free time or kind of during a advisory type period. So games that didn't require any student personal information, that wouldn't break any of the FERPA or any of the other legal requirements, just to keep our students safe, but also we know that they have fun together and that's important too.
Pictionary and Name That Tune were popular at our school.
My students love Uno. I don't know why, but they love Uno.
Elisa.
Can't beat Uno. So I think my answer kind of goes to both the collaboration and the social emotional learning, like Jasara's did. We did a lot of just meeting those kiddos where they were at. Some of our kids were in some rough just home situations, and being able to say to them, okay, let's make a goal, and if we finish this assignment while we're working together, I want you to go get your favorite stuffed animal and show it to me, or go bring your brother that I haven't met and let him introduce himself to me. So trying to kind of build that collaboration, because a lot of times our therapists are working one-on-one with students or in very small groups, and being able to kind of help those students know, like, you know, yes, we're working on schoolwork, and yes, we're working on goals, maybe for speech language or for occupational therapy, but we really do want to know who you are as a person and, you know, what's happening in your life at that moment. So I think, you know, in our small groups, we definitely try to allow time for those conversations, making sure everybody has a job in that small group so that there's a timer and everybody maybe has equal time to talk. But at the same time, when we're working one-on-one, making sure that we're involving whoever and whatever is most important to them in that moment.
I really like the idea of giving students jobs within the small groups to keep them all engaged and active. Pam.
Okay, I actually have 3 because we use them all pretty much the same. Google Classroom, just because you can have those private conversations, or if somebody needs help, they can easily do that. And you also get emails, so it's like a quick notification, doesn't matter what time of day it is. You're going to get a notification that somebody sent you a message. And then Flipgrid, of course, which was already mentioned, but not all kids love Flipgrid. Most of them do, but not all of them do. So having them both, the Google Classroom where you can do text as opposed to video, that was nice for some of them. And then Wakelet, being that one-stop shop, also you can add Flipgrid videos to Wakelet. So it was kind of just a way to where they can even add things to it. You can allow kids to collaborate with you. So those are my 3: Google Classroom, Wakelet, and Flipgrid.
I love the app smashing that's going on there with the embedding the Flipgrid into the Wakelet, and also giving students choice when they don't necessarily like one of the tools that's being offered. So those are good ways to meet kids where they're at. Which leads us into the social emotional learning and the wellness. What apps or add-ons do you use to assess student wellness and connect with them personally from afar? Jasara.
And Jasara, before you jump in, I just want to say, I know that the chat is running fast and furious on YouTube, and we're capturing everything in the Wakelet, and I will go back through the chat and pull out lists and questions and make sure that information gets in the Wakelet. But it's moving so fast that every time I post the link, it disappears in the chat again. So just FYI.
Okay, thanks. All right, so honestly, using slides and doing lessons with kids and integrating Pear Deck, because Pear Deck has awesome like brain breaks, stretch breaks, how do you feel? Just lots of, you know, little assessments to help the teacher realize, okay, wait, maybe I need to take a break and actually talk to my kids, see how they're feeling, you know, check in with them. So I really, really appreciate that aspect of Pear Deck. I think that was like an amazing tool. And I really hope that from today that teachers will go check it out if they've never heard it, and totally start integrating that into their slides.
And being able to do the pop-up feature where you can drop one of those in really quickly is a good feature as well. Emily.
I'm going to echo Pear Deck. I love Pear Deck, and I love those quick check-ins because you really do kind of get a pulse on what's happening in the classroom live. You get to know what's happening right now. The other thing is, again, maybe simple is best, trying to schedule one-on-one kind of just quick 5-minute check-ins with your students. You could do that asynchronously with Flipgrid. You could even do it with like appointment slots in Google Calendar and just get your students to sign up for a time, check in quick 5 minutes, really, and making it one-on-one. So if students don't feel comfortable talking to a group, they can hopefully talk to you, or just kind of making it feel like they really can be heard and they're feeling cared for from their school family, from their teachers.
Elisa.
Absolutely. Everything that everyone else shared, as well as we had some of our teachers and therapists that made up a simple Google form that allowed them. A lot of our teachers use a social emotional program called Zones of Regulation. And it kind of helps students pick out where they are, that no emotion is really bad, but we have better emotion spaces to be able to work. You can't really work well when you're angry, et cetera, et cetera. So we would have them check in like once a week, once a day, depending on the class, on that Google form. And again, only the teacher had access to it to see, but then they could go, okay, you know what, this kid's really having a rough day. Let me reach out to him individually and say, hey, you know, Joe, how can I help you, you know, get caught up so you're not so frustrated, because that's what you were telling me. So I think just being able to employ some quick checks that get everybody the ability to anonymously and or directly to that teacher give some information to them about how they are doing right in that moment.
Thank you. And Pam.
Okay, and we also did the Google Forms with like a how are you feeling today, kind of like that check-in, and it was really helpful. A lot of the teachers really, they found kids that didn't usually, or that were usually really active in class, remotely had a hard time communicating where normally it's not a problem. So it was kind of interesting to see the differences. But then also using the chat feature on Google Meet with emojis. So you could ask that same question, how are you feeling today? Just give me, a thumbs up or a smiley face or something like that that shows me how you're feeling today. And if they were comfortable with it, then they would obviously, they would do whatever they chose. But then if they have both the forms and that way of showing how they're feeling today, then you can kind of, go back and check in on them if you need to.
I love that both of you brought up Google Forms and using that as a daily check-in. And it's a good way to set a norm for students so that they know that the teachers are looking after them and are interested in what they're doing, especially when follow-up happens, because that really is the important part of it.
And there was a Google, I think it was a Google blog post, and I put it in that Wakelet that talked about using Google Forms and some social emotional learning during remote learning. So that is linked in the Wakelet.
Perfect. Thank you so much for adding that.
Sure.
All right, we have 2 questions left and about 10 minutes. So we want to make sure that we hit everybody here. We've been doing pretty well time-wise. Our next question is on differentiated teaching. What are your go-to apps or add-ons for customizing formative assessments for students or small groups? And we've talked small groups a little bit, so I'm interested to see what you guys are going to say here.
So I'm going to go to tried and true Google Forms. So you can do choice eliminator. So based on a choice that a student chooses, it can really help direct them to either information to reteach them, or they can move on to the next level because they've proven mastery or they've proven that they've understood the lesson. So I think you can use that choice eliminator when you set up your forms in assessment. And then, of course, looking at the sheets and filtering. So using all the awesome different ways you can filter information once you get those form reports. You can set kids up to highlight, the kids who got less than 50%. And then you can pull all those kids from that filter in that sheet. You can pull all of them into a Google Meet or direct them to something on Google Classroom. But I think Forms and Sheets has a lot of already built-in tools that just need to be implemented for efficiency and to really help with this differentiation process.
I love the idea of using the filter to really get the data quickly to be able to react on it. Emily.
I think one of the great tools for differentiating stuff is being able to assign individually in Google Classroom. So you can really get after you get that information from the Google form, you can really just take it and say, okay, these 3 or 4 students need this supplemental YouTube video that's really going to walk them through it, or assign a meeting or schedule a meeting with just those students. You can really narrow it in and just work with those students on the pieces that they're missing and get that individualized lesson that happens.
Individualization is the key here. And Elisa.
Awesome. I see somebody popped up the Wakelet link. I've been trying to furiously add it in there, but it's there and on the Twitter as well. So I think when it comes to individualization and really looking at student needs, part of it goes into each LMS, each learning management system has different ways you can do that. If you are using Canvas, there are built-in features that say, I can go into this student and give them extra time on the quiz or have it take away one distractor. So I think looking at your individual, whether it's, compiled with something like Choice Eliminator, or built into the LMS, definitely dig into what features are available, because I think those will be very helpful because they're very quick to do. And once you're in the habit of going in and doing it, it speeds up the process of applying those accommodations for a student who may have an IEP or a 504 plan.
Thank you. And Pam.
Okay, I would say Google Slides for like that choose your own adventure, like we were talking about earlier. Choose your own adventure is a really good way to differentiate. And then also Google Classroom, just because you can give assignments based like to certain kids. So they don't know what each person is working on. Everyone could be working on something different. So just those are two really easy ways to differentiate without a whole lot of extra work on your end.
And we had two of you guys mention Choice Eliminator, and I just throwing out there for teachers in districts like mine where we can't use Choice Eliminator, branching Google Forms is another great way to help guide students in a particular direction without necessarily needing the add-on, but still giving you all of the value of getting that data from a Google form. All right, so our last question is on our parents and caregivers. Can you share an example of a Google app or add-on that helps you connect with parents and caregivers? Jasara.
I mean, it's so basic, but Gmail. I mean, so in Google Classroom, the parents can be invited to get those updates. We have their email addresses. We're a G Suite school, so I use Gmail. I send newsletters. I send individual updates. I send stuff with my Bitmoji in it just to make it more personal. And I know that's not really Google related, but Remind is a great tool as well to send quick messages out there.
Thank you. Emily.
So I think we were talking just about making newsletters, and I think making newsletters in Google Slides is probably the easiest way to do it because you really can kind of customize your layout and make it look pretty. I know there's lots of resources for Canva as well, but I actually am a fan of just doing it inside Google Slides. I think it's a little bit easier to use and a little bit faster. So then downloading that as a PDF or a JPEG and sending that off to parents in whatever email platform you use. Another thing I've used is using Autocrat, which is kind of a weird thing to communicate with parents, but it does allow you to then send an email right through Autocrat. So you fill out your form, the data goes into your spreadsheet, Autocrat turns into a doc, and then sends it out to the families. So this can be done either by students can fill things out, I could fill out if I have some general information I want to send them, or just as a kind of a checkup, you can send student work directly to parents, families, or students that way as well.
You're definitely proving that Google Slides is the powerhouse and the Swiss Army knife.
It's my favorite. I use it for everything.
Elisa.
So I second Autocrat. Once you kind of get into it and figure out how it automates some things, I think it's super helpful. And I think the other thing that's really helped me just in communication, even with other staff and parents, is to use in Google Gmail something called canned responses. It's kind of hidden in there, but it helps you if you find yourself sending the same kind of email content over and over and over to either a parent or a staff member. You can kind of save what that content is so that you don't have to retype it every single time. So if you Google for canned responses, that definitely has helped. And I'll try to add a resource guide into the Wakelet and add in information about Autocrat as well, CRAT. And how we utilize it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we lost Pam. We are hoping she's doing well with the storm. It is fast moving up the East Coast, so I'll be next on the list here. That was it for our questions for our panel, but do you guys have any final thoughts or last tidbit of advice that did not get added or you didn't get an opportunity to speak about that you'd like to add?
I don't know if this might be stupid, but the Jiffy extension is really, it's really cool. You can upload screenshots and create a GIF for your kids, like, for directions or something. So maybe, consider adding that but put the educational twist on it, or just make something fun for your kids to keep them engaged, especially if you are remote like I am in the fall. I mean, there's a lot of slide add-ons like Color Picker and all of those other ones. I don't know.
And I think the most important thing when you think about planning for or trying to orchestrate this differentiated teaching, whether it's differentiated because you have a student with disabilities in your classroom, or it's differentiated because you're teaching part in person and part in virtual, is to think about how do we provide a diversity of ways for kids to respond, and how do we provide a multitude of ways for them to get that input from you as the teacher. And I think when we start with that universal design kind of picture in mind, we're going to have to do less changes to things, because we're automatically giving them, okay, like if you give an assignment, give them 2 or 3 different ways to, let them try and explore making a slides presentation. Maybe that works better for that student, regardless of whether they have a disability or not. And I think the multiple means of both us giving that representation of ideas, and then multiple means for them to express, it's just going to make your life easier as an educator, and it's also going to make your students' life easier when they're trying to get that information back out.
Right, and you could do that in Google Slides. You can make a choice board. Like, there are so many awesome templates out there. So yeah, once again, Google Slides takes the cake, right?
I think my last piece to say is, I've seen this a lot in the chat as I kind of been hanging out in the YouTube chat throughout this, is that I've seen a lot of people saying there's so much, it's going so fast. What am I going to pick? Pick 1 or 2 things that sounded super interesting to you, or one of our favorites. I mean, clearly we're all recommending Google Slides, but you don't have to pick that. Pick some 1 or 2, check out the Wakelet, try them out, and then come back in 2-3 months, 2-3 weeks, whatever your timeline is, and try some more, because you don't have to do all 500 of these things tomorrow. Just pick a couple of them and hopefully they'll work for you.
And remember, small bites will be good for your kids too. So as you learn one new thing and get really good at it, your kids can get really good at it, and then you can expand, because these resources are here. They're not going away. And you guys, you are fantastic resources. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, sharing your knowledge, and being a part of this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Elizabeth.